I was smiling when I walked into my son's business launch in downtown Chicago. After years of watching Ethan struggle, fail, and rebuild his life from nothing, seeing his company's name glowing across that giant hotel ballroom nearly made me cry. Then his business partner stepped onto the stage. The moment I saw Vanessa Cole's face, my stomach dropped so hard I had to grab the back of a chair to steady myself. Because 22 years earlier, my late husband had written that same last name inside a sealed file he begged me never to throw away. And suddenly I realized my son might be standing beside the family that destroyed ours. Before I tell you what happened next, I'd really love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there right now, and if you've ever tried to protect someone you loved, only to have them think you were the enemy. Please leave a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if stories like this touch your heart. My name is Cheryl Rivera. I'm 67 years old, widowed, and until recently, I thought the hardest years of my life were already behind me. I live in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, in the same small brick house my husband Michael and I bought more than 30 years ago. The paint on the shutters is fading now, and the kitchen floor creaks in the same places it always has, but I stayed because every corner of that house still carries pieces of him. Michael died 8 years ago. Some mornings I still reach across the bed before remembering the other side has been empty for a long time. But after he passed, I kept going for one reason only: my son Ethan. When Ethan was younger, he had his father's smile and my stubbornness, which was both a blessing and a curse. He was ambitious from the moment he learned how money worked. At 12 years old, he was mowing lawns around the neighborhood. At 16, he started flipping used furniture online. By 25, he was convinced he was going to become one of the biggest real estate developers in the Midwest. And for a while, I believed it too. But dreams are expensive things, especially in America. By the time Ethan turned 32, he had already gone through 2 failed businesses, 1 ugly lawsuit with a former partner, and nearly declared bankruptcy after a housing project collapsed during COVID delays. I remember finding him sitting in his car outside my house one winter night with tears in his eyes. "I failed again, Mom," he whispered. That nearly broke me. So I did what mothers do. I helped him. I emptied almost half of my retirement savings so he could stay afloat. I refinanced the house Michael left me. I even sold my wedding jewelry except for 1 gold band I still wear every day. I never regretted any of it, because 6 years later, Ethan finally made it. At least that's what everybody believed when I walked into that hotel ballroom in Chicago. The launch party was extravagant in a way Ethan never used to be. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Waiters carried trays of champagne through crowds of investors and reporters. Giant digital screens displayed the logo of Ethan's company, Rivera Urban Capital. People in expensive suits shook his hand like he belonged among them now. And maybe he did. I stood near the back of the ballroom for a while just watching him. My son looked confident, successful, important. He was laughing with investors when he spotted me. "Mom." His face lit up instantly. For a moment I saw my little boy again. He hugged me tightly, kissed my cheek, and pulled me into the center of the room. "You made it," he said. I was worried the drive would be too much. I wouldn't miss this for anything, I told him honestly. And I meant it. Ethan looked handsome in his navy suit, though there were new lines around his eyes I didn't recognize. Success had changed the way he carried himself. He spoke faster now, checked his phone constantly, smiled while distracted. Still, I could tell he wanted my approval. That mattered to me. Then his expression shifted slightly. "There's someone I want you to meet." That was the moment everything inside me tightened, because I already knew who he meant. I had noticed her the second I walked in. Vanessa Cole. tall, elegant, dark blonde hair pulled neatly over one shoulder, a white tailored dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She stood near the stage speaking calmly to a group of investors, and somehow every person in that circle seemed drawn toward her. She had the kind of confidence that made people trust her immediately, too immediately. When she turned toward me, her smile was flawless. "Mrs. Rivera," she said warmly, extending her hand. "I've heard so much about you." Her voice was smooth, controlled, practiced. I shook her hand carefully. "And I've heard a lot about you too," I replied. For half a second, something flickered behind her eyes. Not fear exactly, recognition. But it disappeared so quickly I almost thought I imagined it. Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders proudly. "Vanessa basically saved this company," he said. "I wouldn't be standing here without her." There was admiration in his voice. Deep admiration. Maybe deeper than business. I forced a smile, though my stomach had already begun twisting painfully. "How long have you two worked together?" I asked. "Almost 3 years," Vanessa answered smoothly. Ethan had the vision. "I just helped organize the right funding." Funding! That word hit me strangely. Michael used to say, "Money always leaves fingerprints." And suddenly, standing there beneath those ballroom lights, I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. A sealed brown envelope hidden in the back of my bedroom closet. An envelope Michael gave me shortly before he died. I had never opened it. Not once. At the time, I was too overwhelmed by hospitals, medications, and funeral arrangements to deal with old fears and unfinished business. After that, life simply kept moving. But now, hearing the name Cole again, after more than 20 years, I felt cold all over. Ethan kept talking excitedly. "We're finalizing the Holloway investment tonight," he said. "If everything closes, we expand into 3 more cities next year." "Holloway," I repeated. "Grant Holloway," Vanessa said. "He's one of the largest private investors in Chicago real estate." She spoke carefully, watching me while she smiled. Every instinct I had as a mother suddenly screamed at me. Something wasn't right. Then Ethan's phone buzzed. "Excuse me 1 second, he said before stepping away toward another group of investors. That left me standing alone beside Vanessa. Up close, she smelled faintly of expensive perfume and something sharper underneath. Her posture never relaxed. Neither did her eyes. "You must be very proud of your son," she said softly. "I am." "He's incredibly talented." "Yes," I answered carefully. "He gets that from his father." Another flicker crossed her expression. This time I was certain. She knew exactly who Michael Rivera was. Before I could say another word, a man approached Vanessa holding 2 champagne glasses. "Vanessa," he said quietly, "Grant wants to review the transfer schedule before the presentation." "Transfer schedule." Vanessa immediately straightened. "I'll be right there." Then she turned back toward me with another polished smile. "It was lovely meeting you, Cheryl. Not Mrs. Rivera anymore. Cheryl." As if we were already connected somehow. I watched her walk away toward a private hallway near the ballroom offices, and suddenly I couldn't breathe properly, because deep in the back of my mind, Michael's voice echoed clearly for the first time in years. "If the Cole family ever comes near Ethan, don't trust them." And at that moment, standing in the middle of my son's celebration, I realized the past Michael tried so hard to bury had finally come back for our family. That night, I barely slept. The hotel room Ethan reserved for me overlooked downtown Chicago, but the glittering skyline outside the windows only made me feel more unsettled. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Vanessa Cole standing beside my son with that calm, perfect smile. And behind her face, I saw another one. Leonard Cole. I hadn't spoken that name out loud in more than 20 years. Not since the worst period of our lives. Around 2 a.m, I finally gave up pretending I could rest. I turned on the bedside lamp, wrapped my cardigan around myself, and sat at the edge of the bed staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to call Ethan immediately. Part of me wanted to drive home before sunrise and forget I had ever seen Vanessa. But the deeper truth was this: I was afraid. Because sometimes a woman's instincts know danger long before her mind can explain it. And mine had been screaming at me since the moment I entered that ballroom. The next morning, I drove back to Ohio with shaking hands the entire way. Rain followed me almost the whole drive. Gray skies, endless highways, the kind of weather that makes old memories crawl out from places you thought were buried forever. When I finally pulled into my driveway, my chest tightened. My house looked exactly the same as always. Small flower beds Michael once planted lined the porch steps. Wind chimes hung beside the front door, softly clinking in the cold breeze. For years, this house had been my safe place. But that afternoon, it felt like a vault holding secrets I no longer wanted hidden. I walked straight to our bedroom. For several minutes, I just stood there staring at the closet. Then slowly, I climbed onto the small stool near the dresser and reached toward the top shelf in the back corner. My fingers brushed against cardboard. And there it was, a faded brown envelope sealed with clear tape yellowed by time. My hands trembled the second I touched it. Because suddenly, I was no longer 67 years old. I was 44 again, sitting beside Michael's hospital bed while machines beeped softly around us. He had looked so tired that night. Cancer had taken weight from his body and strength from his voice, but not the fear in his eyes. "Cheryl," he whispered. I remember leaning closer because he barely had enough energy to speak. "There's something I need you to keep." He reached slowly toward the nightstand drawer and handed me the envelope. "Promise me you won't throw it away." I tried to smile back then, tried to calm him. "Michael, honey, you need to rest." But he grabbed my wrist weakly. "No. Listen to me." The seriousness in his voice frightened me immediately. "If the Cole family ever comes near Ethan," he said slowly, struggling for breath, "don't trust them." At the time, I thought the medication was confusing him. Michael had spent years under unbearable stress before his illness. I assumed old fears were surfacing because he knew he was dying. I didn't ask enough questions. That regret still haunts me. Now, standing in our bedroom all these years later, I carefully broke the old tape seal for the first time. Inside were dozens of papers, financial records, copies of contracts, printed emails, bank transfers, handwritten notes in Michael's familiar block lettering, and beneath everything else, a photograph. I froze the moment I picked it up. It showed Leonard Cole standing beside several executives outside a construction site. He looked younger, of course, but I recognized him instantly. Same sharp jawline, same cold eyes, and standing beside him was a little blonde girl around 10 or 11 years old. Vanessa. My stomach twisted painfully. "Oh my God," I whispered. I sat down heavily on the bed and kept reading. Page after page revealed pieces of a story Michael never fully told me while he was alive. 23 years earlier, Michael had worked as senior financial controller for Cole Development Group, one of the fastest-growing construction companies in Ohio at the time. Back then, Leonard Cole was admired publicly, successful, charismatic, powerful. But privately, according to Michael's notes, the company had been drowning in illegal financial activity. Shell companies, hidden offshore accounts, fake invoices, millions of dollars quietly disappearing through fraudulent construction projects. Michael discovered everything accidentally during an internal audit. At first, he believed Leonard would fix it once confronted. Michael always believed honest people would eventually do the right thing. That was one of the reasons I loved him, but instead of fixing the corruption, Leonard made Michael part of it. Or rather, he made it look that way. I kept reading with growing horror. Michael's handwritten notes described meetings behind closed doors, altered records, and sudden transfers connected directly to his department without his authorization. Then came the part that made my chest ache. One line Michael underlined 3 separate times. "They are preparing to make me the fall guy." Tears burned my eyes instantly. I remembered those months so clearly now. The late-night phone calls, the panic attacks, the drinking Michael tried to hide from me, the way he stopped sleeping. Then everything collapsed at once. Federal investigators raided Coal Development Group. News stations reported massive financial fraud. Leonard Cole publicly claimed he had been betrayed by trusted employees, and Michael's name appeared everywhere. I still remember neighbors staring at us in grocery stores, friends suddenly avoiding our calls, Ethan coming home from school crying because other kids said his father was a criminal. Our savings disappeared paying legal fees. Michael lost his license, his reputation, his future. And Leonard Cole walked away untouched. I wiped tears from my face and continued sorting through the documents. Then I found something strange, a copy of a birth certificate. Vanessa Marie Cole. Father Leonard Cole. My hands started shaking harder. Attached beside it was another note from Michael. "If Leonard ever uses her in business operations, it means he's protecting assets through family structures." I didn't fully understand what that meant, but I understood enough. Vanessa wasn't randomly connected to Ethan. This had been intentional. Then I found the final document, a printed contract page covered in Michael's handwritten circles and arrows. At first I didn't recognize it. Then suddenly my blood ran cold. I had seen that formatting recently, at Ethan's launch party, on the digital presentation screen behind Vanessa. The same legal structure, the same wording, the same emergency financial transfer clause Michael had marked in red ink over 20 years ago. I stared at one sentence highlighted heavily by my husband. "In the event of financial instability, operational authority transfers immediately to designated managing partner." My breathing became shallow. Vanessa. Operational authority would transfer to Vanessa. I grabbed my phone instantly and opened the few photos I had taken at Ethan's event. My fingers zoomed in shakily on one slide projected behind the stage. There it was, the exact same clause, only rewritten slightly. "Oh God," I whispered. Michael had known. Somehow, even all those years ago, he had known Leonard Cole would eventually try something like this again, and now my son was standing directly in the middle of it. Then another terrible thought hit me. What if Vanessa already knew I had these documents back at the ballroom? The look in her eyes hadn't been surprise. It had been recognition. I suddenly remembered the way she switched from Mrs. Rivera to Cheryl, as if she already knew far more about me than she should. A chill crawled slowly down my spine, because for the first time I realized this might not simply be about business. It might be about cleaning up the last evidence Leonard Cole failed to destroy 20 years ago. And that evidence was sitting in my hands. I didn't call Ethan that night. I wanted to. God knows I wanted to pick up the phone, tell him everything, beg him to walk away from Vanessa Cole before it was too late. But fear held me back. Not fear for myself. Fear that if I accused Vanessa without proof, Ethan could understand. I would only push him closer to her. So instead, I spent the entire night sitting at my kitchen table with Michael's documents spread around me, like pieces of a puzzle that had waited 20 years to be solved. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows, while the old clock above the stove ticked louder than usual. I hadn't touched most of those papers since the day Michael handed them to me in that hospital room. Now I couldn't stop reading them. Every page revealed another hidden layer of the nightmare my husband had carried alone. Around midnight, I found a yellow legal pad filled with Michael's handwriting. Not financial notes this time. Personal thoughts, warnings, names. One sentence made my chest tighten immediately. Leonard never risks himself first. He uses loyal people, then sacrifices them when necessary. Another line beneath it. If Vanessa enters the business, it means he trained her. I leaned back in my chair slowly. Trained her. The idea disturbed me more than I wanted to admit, because Vanessa didn't act reckless or greedy the way criminals do in movies. She was polished, calm, intelligent. She knew exactly how to make people trust her, especially men like Ethan. Successful men who believed they were too smart to be manipulated. I closed my eyes and pictured the way Ethan looked at her during the launch party. Admiration, trust, maybe even love. That thought hurt more than I expected. At 7 the next morning, my phone rang. Ethan! I stared at the screen for 2 full rings before answering. Hi, sweetheart. You left early, he said. His voice sounded distracted, tired. I didn't want to interrupt your event. You should have stayed longer. People kept asking about you. I smiled faintly despite everything. When did my son become important enough for strangers to ask about his mother? He laughed softly. For a brief moment, everything felt normal again. Then he said her name. Vanessa thought maybe you seemed uncomfortable. There it was. The knot tightened instantly in my stomach. I was just tired, I answered carefully. A short silence followed. Then Ethan lowered his voice slightly. Mom, did something happen? He knew me too well. For a second, I almost told him everything. But how could I explain 20-year-old financial fraud over a phone call without sounding paranoid? Instead, I asked carefully, how much do you really know about Vanessa's family? Another silence. Longer this time. Why? She's Leonard Cole's daughter. I know that. My grip tightened around the phone. You know, Mom, that was decades ago. Her father had legal issues before I even graduated college. Legal issues, I repeated sharply. Ethan, your father lost everything because of that man. His voice changed immediately. Tense. Defensive. That's not what Vanessa told me. The words hit harder than they should have. Not what Vanessa told me. Not what you told me, Mom. I closed my eyes briefly. What exactly did she tell you? That Leonard got blamed for things other executives were doing. Vanessa said her family's been trying to rebuild their reputation ever since. I actually felt dizzy hearing that. The exact same lie. Just rewritten. Ethan, I whispered, your father was innocent. I'm not saying he wasn't, but you don't fully believe it either. That's not fair. No, I said quietly. What happened to your father wasn't fair. The line went silent again. Then Ethan sighed heavily. Mom, I can't do this right now. We're in the middle of closing the Holloway investment. The Holloway investment? Michael's papers suddenly flashed through my mind again. Emergency transfer clauses, managing partner authority, offshore accounts. Ethan, I said firmly, have you signed anything giving Vanessa control of company finances? The silence this time was immediate and dangerous. How do you even know about that? My heart dropped. Oh my God. It's temporary, he said quickly. It's standard protection for investors during restructuring. Did Vanessa tell you that? Yes, because she understands this industry. And your father did too. Mom, listen to me carefully, I interrupted. Your father saw these exact contracts before everything collapsed around him. That's impossible. It isn't. Ethan's patience finally snapped. You're talking about things from 20 years ago like they're happening again. What if they are? They're not. His voice had become cold now. Professional. Controlled. Almost like Vanessa's. You don't understand how business works anymore, he said. The sentence hurt far more than he realized. Because I remembered another man once saying almost the same thing to Michael, right before he destroyed him. I understand enough to know when someone is manipulating my son. That's exactly the kind of accusation I'm talking about. Ethan, Vanessa helped build this company while everybody else doubted me. I never doubted you. You doubted every decision I made after Dad died. That's not true. You always thought I was one bad step away from becoming him. The words hit me like a slap. For several seconds, I couldn't even breathe, because Ethan had never said that out loud before, not once. And suddenly I realized something terrible. All these years, part of my son had quietly carried shame about his father, shame planted there by rumors, by gossip, by history he never fully understood. No. I whispered painfully, Ethan, your father was a good man. I know he was. Then trust what he tried to warn us about. Another silence. Then Ethan spoke softly, almost exhausted. I think you should let the past go, Mom. And just like that, I knew I was losing him. We ended the call awkwardly a minute later. Afterward, I sat motionless at my kitchen table, staring at Michael's papers, until my coffee turned cold beside me. Then my phone buzzed again. A text message. From Vanessa. I don't know how she got my number. That frightened me immediately. The message was simple. I think we got off on the wrong foot. Ethan loves you very much. I hope we can talk soon. No threat, no anger, just politeness, which somehow terrified me more, because people like Vanessa never show sharp edges unless they want to. I didn't answer. Instead, I kept reading through Michael's files. And around noon, I found something new tucked inside a folder labeled Private Structures, a list of offshore accounts. One account number had been circled heavily in red ink. Beneath it, Michael had written Primary Laundering Route. My stomach tightened again, because I recognized part of the account number immediately. Not from 20 years ago, from Ethan's launch presentation. One of Rivera Urban Capital's holding companies had displayed the same final 4 digits during a financial projection slide. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Then I checked again carefully. It wasn't. Oh, God. I grabbed my laptop and searched public business registration records connected to Ethan's company, and there it was. A shell corporation linked indirectly to Rivera Urban Capital, managed through a financial entity connected to the Cole family. My pulse began pounding violently. This wasn't history repeating itself. It was the exact same structure, the exact same system. Only now my son stood where Michael once stood. And suddenly another horrifying realization hit me. If Vanessa and Leonard were using Ethan the same way they used Michael, then eventually someone would need to take the blame again. I drove to Chicago the next morning without telling Ethan I was coming. The entire trip I kept rehearsing what I would say to him. Not accusations, not panic, just facts. I told myself that if Ethan could simply sit down long enough to read Michael's documents with an open mind, he would understand. He had to understand. Because no matter how successful my son became, beneath all that confidence, he still had a good heart. And good people eventually recognize the truth. At least that's what I kept praying. By the time I arrived at Rivera Urban Capital's downtown office building, my nerves were so raw, my hands shook while parking the car. The office occupied the 23rd floor of a glass tower overlooking the Chicago River. Everything about the building screamed money. Marble floors, security desks, young professionals carrying laptops and expensive coffee. It didn't feel like Ethan anymore. Or maybe I was finally realizing how far away from me he'd already gone. The receptionist smiled politely when I approached. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Ethan Rivera." Her expression changed immediately. "Oh, of course. One moment, Mrs. Rivera." That surprised me. Apparently everyone knew who I was. While she made the call, I noticed Vanessa standing through the glass walls of a nearby conference room. She was speaking to 3 men in suits while pointing calmly at financial charts on a large screen. Even from across the office, she looked completely in control. Then her eyes lifted and locked directly onto mine. No surprise, no confusion, just a calm, unreadable stare. A few seconds later, Ethan came hurrying down the hallway. "Mom." He looked genuinely shocked. "What are you doing here? We need to talk." His smile faded instantly, not because of embarrassment, because he already knew what this was about. "Okay," he said quietly. "Come into my office." The room overlooking the city was enormous compared to the tiny apartment Ethan used to rent years ago. Dark wood shelves lined the walls. Awards and framed magazine features sat behind his desk. One framed article read, "The New Face of Midwest Development." I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt terrified. Ethan closed the office door behind us. "Mom, if this is about Vanessa again..." "It is." He rubbed his forehead immediately. "Please don't do this." I placed Michael's envelope carefully on his desk. "I opened your father's files." That got his attention. Ethan stared at the envelope silently. For a moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Fear. Not fear of me. Fear of his father's memory. "You never opened those before," he said quietly. "I know. So why now?" "Because Vanessa Cole walked into our lives." He looked away immediately. "That alone told me everything. You already know more than you admitted over the phone, don't you?" Ethan exhaled heavily and sat down behind the desk. "I know my dad blamed Leonard Cole for what happened." "Blamed," I repeated sharply. "Ethan, your father was framed. You don't know that for certain." "Yes, I do." I opened the envelope and spread several papers across his desk. "These are bank transfers connected to offshore accounts Leonard controlled." Ethan barely glanced at them. "Mom, financial structures like this are common in large-scale development. Not when they're hiding stolen money." "Who told you that, Dad?" "He documented everything himself." Ethan finally looked directly at the papers. I saw hesitation creeping into his expression now. Good. At least he was listening. I slid another document toward him. "This clause right here," I said firmly. "The Emergency Transfer Authority. Michael highlighted it 20 years ago because Leonard used it to take control of companies before they collapsed. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's not what's happening here. How do you know? Because Vanessa explained it to me. There it is again, I whispered painfully. You trust her more than your own parents now. That's not fair. No. Then tell me why your company is connected to the same offshore structures Leonard Cole used. That finally shook him. His eyes narrowed immediately. What are you talking about? I handed him printed screenshots from the business records I found online. Ethan studied them carefully. For several seconds he said nothing. Then quietly, Where did you get these? So I'm right. He stood up suddenly. You went digging through company records. I was trying to protect you. You had no right. No right. My voice cracked. After everything your father suffered because of these people? Ethan turned away from me, pacing toward the windows. You don't understand how complicated corporate financing is, and you don't understand you're being used. That's enough. The sharpness in his voice stunned me silent. He rarely spoke to me that way. When he turned back around, his face looked exhausted. Mom, Vanessa isn't her father. How can you be sure? Because I know her. No, I said softly. You know the version she wants you to see. Before Ethan could answer, the office door opened gently. Vanessa stepped inside carrying a tablet. She stopped immediately when she saw the papers spread across the desk, but only for a second. Then her expression smoothed perfectly again. Am I interrupting? Ethan sighed. Just bad timing. Vanessa looked between us carefully. I can come back later. No, I said before Ethan could answer. Actually, maybe this is a good time. Vanessa's smile barely shifted. Okay. I picked up the birth certificate from Michael's file and held it up. You knew exactly who my husband was the moment we met. A long silence filled the office. Ethan looked confused. What Vanessa remained calm. I know your father worked for my father years ago. Worked for him, I repeated in disbelief. You know Leonard destroyed him. Vanessa's eyes softened slightly. Mrs. Rivera. Don't. For the first time, tension cracked through her perfect composure. I understand why you feel protective of Ethan. You understand nothing. Ethan stepped between us slightly. Mom. No, Ethan. You deserve answers. I looked directly at Vanessa. Did you tell my son your father ruined our family? Vanessa hesitated. That tiny hesitation told Ethan more than my words ever could. His face slowly changed. Vanessa. She turned toward him carefully. It's more complicated than Cheryl thinks. Cheryl? Not Mrs. Rivera anymore. Not even pretending now. My father made mistakes. Vanessa continued carefully, but the investigation back then involved multiple people. Michael Rivera was innocent, I snapped. Vanessa lowered her eyes briefly. That's not how the courts ruled. I actually felt my heart break hearing that. After all these years, after everything Michael suffered, that was still the story they told. Ethan looked increasingly uncomfortable now. Vanessa, why didn't you tell me all this before? Because your mother already hated my family before she met me. That's not an answer. Vanessa's calm mask slipped for the first time. Only slightly. But I saw it. I didn't think it mattered anymore, she said quietly. It matters to me, Ethan replied. Silence. Heavy silence. Then Vanessa walked slowly toward Ethan's desk and placed the tablet down in front of him. We have the Holloway transfer approvals in 2 hours, she said gently. If we delay again, we risk losing the investment. There it was. Business first. Always business first. Ethan looked trapped between us now, between his mother and the woman who helped build his future. And I suddenly realized how deeply Vanessa had already woven herself into every part of his life. Emotionally, financially, professionally. She hadn't simply partnered with Ethan. She had positioned herself so carefully that removing her might destroy everything around him. Then Vanessa turned toward me again, and this time her voice dropped lower, almost private. You should be careful reopening old wounds, Cheryl. A chill ran through me instantly, because beneath the politeness I heard the warning clearly, and judging by the look in her eyes, she knew far more about Michael's files than she ever should have. I left Ethan's office feeling like I had just watched my son drift farther away from me than ever before. The elevator ride down from the 23rd floor felt endless. My reflection in the mirrored walls looked older somehow, tired, defeated. By the time I reached the parking garage, my chest hurt so badly I had to sit inside my car for several minutes before turning the key. Vanessa's words kept replaying in my mind. You should be careful reopening old wounds, Cheryl. It wasn't concern. It was a warning. And deep down, I knew something else too. Vanessa wasn't afraid of me. Not yet. Which meant either she believed Ethan would never trust me over her, or she thought she had already covered every trail Michael left behind. But Michael had been smarter than Leonard Cole realized. I kept reminding myself of that as I drove through downtown traffic toward the only person who might still know the full truth. Arthur Bennett, Michael's old attorney. The last time I saw Arthur was at Michael's funeral 8 years earlier. He had aged considerably since then, but his office remained exactly the same, small, cluttered, and filled floor to ceiling with old legal books. When his assistant led me inside, Arthur looked genuinely stunned. Cheryl. He stood slowly from behind his desk. My God. It's been years. His hair was almost entirely white now, and his shoulders curved slightly with age, but his eyes were still sharp. After we hugged awkwardly, he studied my face carefully. What happened? I placed Michael's envelope on his desk. Arthur's expression changed immediately. You opened it? Yes. He sat down slowly. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Arthur removed his glasses and sighed heavily. I always wondered if this day would come. A chill moved through me. You knew what was inside some of it. Why didn't you tell me everything after Michael died? Arthur looked genuinely pained. Because Michael made me promise not to. I stared at him in disbelief. What, he didn't want Ethan growing up consumed by revenge? Arthur paused quietly. And honestly, we didn't think Leonard Cole would ever return. But he did. Arthur nodded grimly. I pulled Vanessa's photo from the file and slid it across the desk. She's working with Ethan now. Arthur picked up the photo carefully. The moment he saw her face, all color drained from his expression. Oh no, that reaction alone terrified me. You recognize her. Yes, how Arthur leaned back slowly, rubbing his jaw. I met Vanessa once years ago. She was still a teenager. Michael knew about her. I know. I sat forward immediately. What exactly did Michael discover? Arthur opened one of the folders from the envelope. Leonard Cole wasn't just stealing money from development projects, he explained quietly. He was moving funds through shell corporations tied to family members and offshore entities, the same structures Ethan's company is using now. Arthur looked at me sharply. You confirmed that? Yes. He cursed softly under his breath. For a long moment, Arthur stared silently at the document spread across his desk. Then finally, "Cheryl, your husband was very close to exposing everything." My throat tightened. How close? Close enough that Leonard tried to destroy him before he could go public. I closed my eyes briefly. Even after reading Michael's files, hearing someone else say it aloud still hurt. Arthur continued carefully. The original federal investigation was compromised. Records disappeared. Witnesses changed statements. Leonard had connections everywhere, and Michael paid for it. Yes. The room fell silent again. Then Arthur pulled out one particular document from the stack. I recognized it immediately, the emergency authority clause Ethan had signed. Arthur's face hardened. This is almost identical. To what? To the contract Leonard used 20 years ago. I felt sick instantly. Arthur grabbed a pen and circled several sections rapidly. See these transfer provisions? These allow financial responsibility to move downward while operational authority moves upward. I frowned. What does that mean? It means if something collapses financially, Ethan could legally carry the liability while Vanessa controls the remaining assets. The blood drained from my face. So my son becomes responsible for the damage. Arthur nodded slowly. Exactly. My stomach twisted violently. Michael all over again. The same trap. The same structure. Just modernized. Arthur continued reviewing the papers for nearly an hour while I sat across from him trying not to panic. Then suddenly he froze. What is it? He held up one of the offshore account pages. I remember this number. You do? Arthur stood and walked toward an old filing cabinet near the wall. After several minutes of digging through dusty folders, he returned holding another file entirely. This, he said quietly, was one of the few records Michael managed to copy before everything collapsed. He handed me a faded transfer ledger. Several account numbers matched the ones connected to Ethan's company. Exactly. Oh my God. Arthur looked deeply troubled now. This isn't coincidence anymore. No, this is operational continuity. I blinked. What Arthur lowered his voice carefully. It means someone intentionally rebuilt the same financial system, and that someone is Vanessa, maybe. He hesitated. Or maybe someone above Vanessa. My chest tightened immediately. Leonard. Arthur nodded slowly. But Leonard disappeared from public business years ago. That doesn't mean he stopped working. Arthur sat back down heavily. Men like Leonard never truly retire. They just learn how to hide behind other people. Vanessa. A respected female executive with a polished reputation. The perfect shield. Then another terrifying thought hit me. What if Ethan already signed enough paperwork to destroy himself? Arthur's silence answered me before his words did. How bad could this get? I whispered. If these structures are being used illegally. Arthur paused grimly. Your son could lose the company, his assets, and potentially face criminal exposure. I nearly stopped breathing. No. He may not even realize what he signed. But Vanessa does. Yes. I looked down at Michael's handwriting covering the old documents. All those years. All that suffering. And somehow Michael had still tried to protect Ethan from beyond the grave. Tears blurred my vision suddenly. Arthur's voice softened. Your husband never stopped loving that boy, Cheryl. I know. He kept these records because he was terrified history would repeat itself. And now it is. Arthur didn't answer. Because we both knew it was true. Then his expression shifted slightly. There's something else. What Arthur hesitated carefully. Michael once believed someone inside the Cole family wanted out. I frowned. What do you mean? About 6 months before the investigation collapsed, Michael told me he thought a family member was secretly feeding him information, who he never knew for certain. My mind immediately jumped to Vanessa, but Arthur shook his head slowly. No. Vanessa would have been too young back then. Then who, I don't know. Arthur leaned forward. But if someone inside that family helped Michael once before, there may still be fractures there now. That tiny possibility gave me the first fragile spark of hope I'd felt in days. Then Arthur looked directly at me. Cheryl, you need to be careful. I know. No, I mean genuinely careful. If Leonard Cole realizes you still have these documents, you could become a serious problem for him. The room suddenly felt colder. You think they know? Arthur gave me a long look. Vanessa approached Ethan for a reason. I swallowed hard, and deep down I already knew the answer. This had never been random. Not Ethan's company, not the partnership, not Vanessa walking into our lives. The Cole family had come back for something unfinished, and somehow Michael's old files were still dangerous enough to matter after all these years. For the next 3 days, I barely left my hotel room in Chicago. Arthur had insisted I stay nearby instead of returning to Ohio. If Ethan's company is about to finalize another transfer, he warned me timing matters now. So I stayed. Every morning I sat near the window with Michael's files spread across the small round table beside untouched cups of coffee. Arthur continued digging through old records while I tried calling Ethan over and over again. Most of the time he didn't answer. When he finally did, his voice sounded rushed and distant. Mom, I'm in meetings. Ethan, please listen to me. I already told you I'm handling this. You're not seeing what's happening. No, he snapped once. You're seeing ghosts from 20 years ago. That sentence stayed with me long after the call ended. Ghosts. Maybe that was what I had become to him. An aging widow clinging to old pain while he tried to build a future. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition, and patterns don't lie. On Thursday evening, Arthur called me unexpectedly. I found something. I drove to his office immediately. When I arrived, Arthur looked more unsettled than I had ever seen him. What happened? He slid several printed financial reports across the desk. These are recent transfer schedules tied to Rivera Urban Capital. I stared at the documents. Several transactions were scheduled to move through offshore entities within the next 48 hours. Huge amounts of money. What does this mean? It means the Holloway investment is about to be redistributed before the audit process finishes. My chest tightened. Audit. Arthur nodded grimly. There's an internal review coming. Ethan probably doesn't even realize it yet. And Vanessa does. Yes. A terrible silence filled the room. Then Arthur looked directly at me. I think they're preparing to drain the company. The words made me physically cold. What happens to Ethan if they do? He becomes legally responsible for the losses. Exactly like Michael. I covered my mouth with my hand. No. Arthur leaned back heavily. Cheryl, we may not have much time left. That night I made a decision I never imagined myself making at 67 years old. I followed Vanessa. The idea sounded ridiculous even in my own head, a grandmother playing detective in downtown Chicago. But fear makes people do things they never thought they were capable of. Around 7 that evening, I parked across the street from Rivera Urban Capital's building after employees began leaving for the night. For almost an hour, nothing happened. Then Vanessa emerged from the lobby alone. She wasn't dressed for another business meeting, no heels, no sleek white suits, just dark slacks, a long coat, and her hair tied back casually. She looked less polished, more guarded. I waited until her car pulled away before following carefully behind. Traffic carried us north through downtown before she finally stopped outside an upscale historic hotel near the river. I parked half a block away. Vanessa entered through a private side entrance instead of the main lobby. That immediately set off alarms in my mind. Why hide? I waited several minutes before going inside myself. The hotel lobby glowed with warm, golden lighting and quiet piano music. Wealthy couples drank cocktails near the bar, while business travelers crossed through the marble floors. Vanessa was nowhere in sight. Then I noticed the elevator indicator. Penthouse level. My pulse quickened. I moved toward the elevators, slowly pretending to check my phone. One elevator door opened moments later. A silver-haired man stepped out, and my entire body froze. Leonard Cole. Older now, of course. His hair had gone gray. His face carried deeper lines, but I would have recognized him anywhere. The same cold eyes, the same controlled expression, the same man who destroyed my husband's life. For one terrifying second, I thought he saw me too, but his attention remained fixed on his phone as he crossed the lobby quickly toward the private exit. My hands shook violently. Arthur had been right. Leonard never disappeared. He had been here all along. The moment Leonard exited the building, I hurried toward the elevators and pressed the penthouse button before I could lose my nerve. My heart pounded so loudly during the ride upward, I thought someone else might hear it. When the elevator doors opened, the hallway was quiet except for distant voices coming from a partially open lounge near the corner. I moved carefully closer, and then I heard Vanessa speaking. "He signed everything faster than you expected." Leonard answered calmly. "That's because he wants to prove himself." My stomach twisted. Vanessa lowered her voice slightly. "What about Cheryl Rivera?" Hearing my name nearly stopped my breathing. "She opened Michael's files," Leonard said flatly. "So they knew." Every muscle in my body tightened instantly. Vanessa sounded uneasy now. She recognized the clauses immediately. "She's emotional. Emotional people are predictable. You're underestimating her." A short silence followed. Then Leonard's voice turned colder. "The only thing that matters is finishing this before the audit." I pressed myself carefully against the hallway wall, terrified they would hear me breathing. Vanessa spoke again. "And Ethan." He signed willingly. Legally, responsibility transfers to him. The cruelty in Leonard's voice made me feel sick. My son truly was nothing more than a disposable shield to him, exactly like Michael had been. Then Leonard added something that made my blood run cold. "Once the funds move, Rivera Urban Capital collapses under liability. We walk away clean." I nearly gasped aloud. Vanessa lowered her voice again. "And Cheryl." A pause. Then Leonard answered quietly. "If she becomes a problem, we handle it." Fear shot through my entire body instantly. Not vague fear, real fear. The kind that settles deep into your bones. I fumbled shakily for my phone and managed to start recording audio just as Leonard continued speaking. Michael should have handed over the evidence years ago. Instead, he forced unnecessary damage. Vanessa sounded tense now. He died because of stress from what happened. Leonard's response was ice cold. That was his choice. Tears burned my eyes immediately. After all these years, there wasn't a single ounce of regret in that man. Not for Michael, not for Ethan, not for anyone. Then suddenly footsteps moved closer. My heart nearly stopped. Vanessa appeared at the edge of the hallway entrance before I could retreat fully out of sight. For one horrifying second, we stared directly at each other. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. But I knew instantly from her expression that she understood everything. She knew I had heard enough. Vanessa recovered first. Her face became unreadable again. Then calmly she walked toward me. I wanted to run. Instead, I stood frozen. When she stopped in front of me, her voice was almost gentle. "You shouldn't be here. You're destroying my son." Pain flickered briefly across her eyes. Real pain. It surprised me. "You don't understand everything," she whispered. "Then explain it." She glanced back toward the lounge nervously. "You need to leave before he sees you. He already ruined one Rivera." Vanessa swallowed hard. Then quietly, "You think I had a choice?" Before I could answer, Leonard's voice echoed from inside the lounge. "Vanessa." Instant panic crossed her face. She grabbed my arm suddenly. "Go! Now!" I pulled away immediately, but the fear in her eyes stayed with me all the way back to the elevator. Because for the first time since this nightmare began, I realized Vanessa Cole might not only be hiding secrets from Ethan, she might also be terrified of her own father. I didn't sleep at all after seeing Leonard Cole. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again. "If she becomes a problem, we handle it." At 67 years old, I never imagined I would feel physically afraid of another human being. But Leonard carried the kind of darkness that didn't fade with age. If anything, time had made him colder. And somehow my son had walked directly into his world. By sunrise, I had already sent the audio recording to Arthur Bennett. His response came almost immediately. "Do not confront Leonard alone again." Too late for that. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed staring at my phone for nearly an hour before finally deciding I couldn't wait any longer. Ethan needed to hear the recording. Not tomorrow. Not after another contract. Now. I drove straight to Rivera Urban Capital's office again, rehearsing every word I planned to say, but the moment I stepped into the lobby, I knew something had changed. The receptionist who greeted me warmly before now looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Rivera, I need to see Ethan. He's in a board meeting right now." "I'll wait." Her expression tightened slightly. "I don't think today is a good day." A cold feeling crept into my stomach. "What does that mean?" Before she could answer, Ethan appeared from the hallway. The second I saw his face, my heart sank. He looked angry. Not frustrated. Not stressed. Angry. "Mom," he said sharply, walking toward me. "Can we talk outside?" The entire lobby suddenly felt silent around us. I followed him toward the elevator in stunned confusion. The moment the doors closed, Ethan turned toward me. "You followed Vanessa." My pulse jumped. So Vanessa had told him. "She's dangerous." That's not an answer. "I heard Leonard Cole confess everything you spied on her at a hotel I was trying to save you." Ethan let out a harsh breath and shook his head. "This has gotten completely out of control." I stared at him in disbelief. "Out of control, Ethan. They're planning to destroy your company." "No. You're inventing stories because you hate her family." I almost couldn't process what I was hearing. "Hate her family," I whispered. "Your father was destroyed by those people. You don't know the whole story." The elevator doors opened onto a private hallway, but neither of us moved immediately. Ethan's voice dropped lower. "Vanessa told me Leonard already offered a settlement years ago. I felt physically sick. A settlement for what happened to Dad. There was never a settlement. She said your pride refused it." My mouth actually fell open. The manipulation was unbelievable. That's a lie. You call everything she says a lie. Because it is. Ethan stepped away from me, running both hands through his hair. You know what, Mom? I think this stopped being about protecting me a long time ago. His words hit harder than any slap. What does that mean? I think you can't stand seeing someone else influence my life. Pain exploded through my chest. Ethan, you never liked any woman I dated. That is not true. You questioned every business decision I ever made. Because I was trying to help you. No, he snapped. You were trying to control me. The elevator doors finally closed behind us again, leaving us standing alone in the hallway. I stared at my son and barely recognized him. Not because he was cruel, because he sounded exactly like someone repeating another person's thoughts. Vanessa's thoughts. Then Ethan said the one thing that shattered me completely. Vanessa understands me in ways you never did. I physically flinched. For several seconds, I couldn't even speak. After everything, after sacrificing my retirement, after standing beside him through every failure and heartbreak, this woman had convinced him I was the enemy. My voice trembled when I finally spoke. Your father died trying to protect this family, and maybe he also made mistakes you refuse to admit. I stared at him in horror. Deep down, some part of Ethan still believed the accusations against Michael. All these years later, all because the truth had never fully come out. Tears burned my eyes immediately. I cannot believe you just said that. Ethan looked away first. For a brief second, guilt crossed his face, but it vanished quickly. Mom, I need space. No, I whispered desperately. You need the truth. I reached for my phone. I recorded Leonard Cole talking last night. That finally stopped him. His expression shifted immediately. What I heard him admit everything. Ethan frowned. What are you talking about? I opened the audio recording with shaking fingers and pressed play. Leonard's voice filled the hallway quietly. Once the funds move, Rivera Urban Capital collapses under liability. We walk away clean. Ethan's entire body stiffened. Then Leonard's next words played. Rivera signed willingly. Silence. Absolute silence. Ethan stared at the phone like he couldn't breathe. For one brief moment, hope rushed through me. Finally, he would understand. But then another voice entered the recording. Vanessa. You think I had a choice? Ethan grabbed the phone from my hand immediately. Where did you get this? At the hotel. You secretly recorded them. Yes, this could be edited. I stared at him in disbelief again. You think I faked this? I don't know what to think anymore. He sounded panicked now. Not angry, terrified, because deep down he recognized Leonard's voice. He recognized the truth. But accepting it meant accepting that everything he built might collapse around him, and people will cling to denial when the truth threatens their entire identity. Then suddenly another voice interrupted us. Grandma! I turned instantly. Sophie stood at the end of the hallway holding a laptop bag against her shoulder. I hadn't even known she was in Chicago. Sophie. My granddaughter looked nervously between Ethan and me. What's going on? Nothing, Ethan said too quickly. That's obviously not true, she replied. Sophie had always been observant. Too observant. At 19, she already noticed things most adults missed. Her eyes landed on my tear-streaked face immediately. Grandma, are you okay? Before I could answer, Ethan spoke sharply. You shouldn't be here today. I work here part-time, remember? Right? Ethan had hired her during college breaks to help with digital analytics. Sophie stepped closer carefully. Then her expression changed slightly. Wait. This is about Vanessa, isn't it? Ethan stiffened. What do you mean? Sophie hesitated. And suddenly I saw fear cross her face too, what I asked softly. She lowered her voice immediately. I didn't say anything before because I thought maybe I misunderstood. Ethan frowned. Misunderstood what? Sophie glanced around the hallway nervously before speaking. 2 nights ago, I saw Vanessa deleting financial files from your laptop. The entire hallway went silent. Ethan blinked slowly. What? She was in your office after everyone left. I came back because I forgot my headphones. Sophie swallowed hard. She didn't know I saw her. Ethan shook his head immediately. No, that's impossible. She noticed me afterward, Sophie whispered. And she looked really scared. I watched Ethan's face carefully. The certainty he carried for weeks was finally beginning to crack. Just slightly, but enough. Sophie continued nervously. I recovered one of the deleted emails from the cloud backup. My heart jumped. You what? She nodded slowly. I wasn't trying to snoop. I just thought something felt wrong. Ethan stared at her now. What email? Sophie reached into her laptop bag carefully, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw genuine fear appear in my son's eyes. Because somewhere deep down, Ethan Rivera was finally starting to realize his mother might have been telling the truth all along. Sophie's hands trembled slightly as she opened her laptop right there in the hallway outside Ethan's office. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Ethan stood motionless beside us, his face pale and tight with tension. For the first time since this nightmare began, he looked uncertain instead of defensive. That alone told me everything. Part of him already knew. Sophie swallowed nervously. I restored the deleted file from the cloud cache before the system fully synced, she explained quietly. If Vanessa had waited another hour, it probably would have disappeared permanently. Ethan rubbed both hands over his face. Show me. Sophie opened an email folder and clicked a message marked Private Transfer Schedule. The sender name made my stomach turn instantly. Vanessa Cole. The recipient was listed only as L.C. Leonard Cole. Ethan leaned closer toward the screen. I watched the color slowly drain from his face as Sophie opened the message. The email was brief. Too brief. That somehow made it even worse. Grant transfer expected Friday. Rivera still unaware of liability exposure. Once final signatures clear move. Remaining assets immediately. Silence. Complete silence. Then another line appeared beneath it. Make sure Rivera carries operational responsibility before withdrawal phase. Ethan physically stepped backward. No. Sophie opened another attachment connected to the email. A spreadsheet filled the screen. Transfer routes, offshore accounts, holding corporations. Several matched the exact records Arthur found inside Michael's old files. I covered my mouth with my hand. Oh, God. Ethan kept staring at the screen like his mind refused to process what he was seeing. She told me, he whispered. She told me the offshore structures were for tax flexibility. I felt tears sting my eyes immediately, because suddenly standing there in that cold hallway, Ethan didn't look like a successful CEO anymore. He looked like my little boy again, confused, hurt, betrayed. Sophie looked close to crying herself. There's more. She opened another recovered email. This one was older. Vanessa to Leonard. Rivera trusts me completely now. Final authority transfer should happen within weeks. Ethan's breathing became uneven. No. His voice cracked so softly it nearly broke my heart. Then came the line that shattered him completely. Michael Rivera was easier to break. Ethan is emotionally attached, which complicates timing. Ethan stared at those words in total silence. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Then suddenly he slammed the laptop shut so hard Sophie jumped. No! His voice was louder now. Angrier. Not at me. At himself. This can't be real. It is, I whispered gently. Ethan turned away immediately. I saw tears forming in his eyes for the first time since he was a teenager. And somehow that hurt me almost more than everything else. Because mothers never stop hurting when their children suffer, even when those children break your heart first. I trusted her, Ethan whispered. No one answered, because there was nothing to say. He walked several feet down the hallway, breathing hard while running both hands through his hair again and again. Then suddenly he turned back toward me. You knew. It wasn't an accusation anymore. It was grief. I was trying to tell you. His face twisted painfully. I said those things to you. I shook my head quickly. None of that matters right now. Yes, it does. Tears filled his eyes fully now. I accused you of lying about Dad. My chest tightened instantly. Ethan. I let her make me believe he might have been guilty. The shame in his voice was unbearable. I stepped toward him carefully. Your father would understand. But Ethan shook his head violently. No, he wouldn't. He looked completely shattered now. Years of trust collapsing all at once. Then suddenly Sophie spoke again. There's another problem. We both turned toward her immediately. Sophie reopened the laptop slowly. The final transfer is tomorrow night. My stomach dropped. What the Holloway investment signing? Ethan's expression darkened instantly. That's when Grant officially releases the funds. Sophie nodded nervously. And according to these schedules, the offshore transfers happen less than 2 hours later. Arthur had been right. They were about to drain the company. Ethan sat down heavily against the hallway bench, staring blankly ahead. If those transfers happen, he whispered. You'll carry the liability, I finished softly. His eyes closed immediately. Everything he built. Everything he sacrificed for. Gone. Then another realization hit him. My employees. I looked at him carefully. There are over 60 people working for Rivera Urban Capital now. The pain in his voice deepened. They trusted me. And that was the moment I truly knew my son was still a good man. Because even now, in the middle of his own collapse, he was thinking about other people first. Sophie spoke quietly. What are we going to do? Before I could answer, Ethan stood abruptly. We stopped the signing. I nodded immediately. Yes, but Ethan already looked uncertain again. They'll deny everything. Not with these emails. They'll claim the files were manipulated. My mind raced rapidly. We still have the recording from Leonard, and they'll attack how you obtained it. He paced several steps. Vanessa knows corporate law better than I do. That frightened me, because it meant Ethan finally understood how deeply outmatched he'd been. Then suddenly my phone rang. Arthur Bennett. I answered immediately. Arthur. His voice sounded urgent. Where are you with Ethan and Sophie? Good. Listen carefully. I just spoke with Grant Holloway. Ethan looked up sharply at the name. What did he say? I asked. He doesn't know anything yet, but he agreed to meet privately tonight. Hope flickered through me instantly. If we show him the evidence before tomorrow's signing, Arthur continued, we may stop the transfer before the funds move. Ethan stepped closer immediately when 9 o'clock. Private dining room at the Langford Hotel, the same hotel where I saw Leonard. A cold chill ran through me. Arthur lowered his voice carefully. There's something else. My stomach tightened. What I checked additional corporate filings. I could hear papers moving on his end of the line. Leonard Cole is still financially connected to multiple holding companies involved in Rivera Urban Capital. Ethan looked physically sick hearing that. Arthur continued grimly. If federal investigators trace those transfers after the collapse, Ethan's signature will be attached to everything. My son closed his eyes painfully. I signed every approval myself. You were manipulated, Arthur said firmly, but legally that may not matter unless we stop this before completion. The line fell silent. Then Ethan finally spoke. Arthur. Yes. My father really was innocent, wasn't he? I felt tears instantly fill my eyes again. Arthur answered without hesitation. Yes. Completely. Ethan lowered his head. For several seconds he said nothing at all. Then quietly, I should have believed my mother. I looked away immediately because I knew if I saw the pain in his face any longer, I would start crying too. But deep down, another fear was growing stronger now. Because if Vanessa and Leonard realized Ethan had discovered the truth, they would become dangerous. And somehow, I couldn't stop thinking about Vanessa's terrified expression outside the hotel lounge. You think I had a choice? At the time, I thought she meant fear of exposure. Now I wasn't so sure. Maybe Vanessa Cole wasn't only helping her father destroy my son. Maybe she had been trapped inside Leonard Cole's control her entire life. And tomorrow night, all of us were about to find out exactly how far Leonard would go to protect himself. The private signing dinner was scheduled for 7 o'clock Friday night at the Langford Hotel, the same hotel where I had overheard Leonard Cole planning to destroy my son. By 6:30, my nerves were stretched so thin I could barely hold my purse steady. Arthur Bennett sat beside me in the hotel lounge reviewing printed copies of the evidence one last time. Sophie stayed close near the elevators, clutching her laptop against her chest like it contained explosives. In many ways it did. Ethan stood silently near the window overlooking downtown Chicago. I had never seen him look this exhausted before, not even during his bankruptcy years, because financial failure hurts. But betrayal destroys something deeper. Every few minutes, Ethan would close his eyes briefly, as if replaying every conversation he ever had with Vanessa, searching for the exact moment love turned into manipulation. Finally, he spoke quietly without turning around. She knew about Dad the entire time. No one answered, because we all knew it was true. She sat in our house, he continued softly. She listened to stories about him. His voice cracked slightly. And all along, I walked over carefully and touched his arm. You didn't deserve this. He looked down immediately. But you did? The pain in his eyes nearly broke me. Mom, I let her turn me against you. I shook my head gently. No. Leonard did that, but I chose to believe her. His voice dropped lower. I said terrible things to you? I smiled sadly. You're my son. Nothing you say could ever stop me from loving you. That nearly made him cry again. Before he could respond, Arthur checked his watch. They'll be arriving soon. The atmosphere changed instantly. Business mode. Survival mode. Arthur handed Ethan a folder. Grant Holloway agreed to hear everything privately before signing anything official. But once Leonard realizes we know this situation could escalate quickly, Ethan nodded grimly. What about federal investigators? Arthur lowered his voice. I contacted a financial crimes division this afternoon. They're monitoring the situation. A chill moved through me. This was no longer family drama. This was criminal. At exactly 7 o'clock, the hotel's private dining room doors opened. Vanessa walked in first. Elegant as always. Controlled. Beautiful, but the moment her eyes landed on Ethan's face, I saw panic flicker across her expression. She knew. Immediately. Behind her came Leonard Cole wearing a dark tailored suit and the same cold confidence he carried 20 years earlier, and finally Grant Holloway entered with 2 assistants behind him. The wealthy investor looked confused by the tension in the room already. What's going on here? He asked carefully. No one answered immediately. Vanessa's eyes remained fixed on Ethan. When did you find out? Her voice was almost a whisper. Ethan looked at her like he barely recognized her anymore. You used me. Leonard stepped forward smoothly. Ethan. I think there's been some misunderstanding. Arthur stood instantly. No misunderstanding at all. He placed a thick folder onto the dining table. Would you like to explain the offshore transfers first, Leonard? The older man's expression barely shifted, but I noticed his jaw tighten slightly. Grant Holloway frowned immediately. What offshore transfers? Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. Leonard answered calmly. Arthur Bennett has held a personal grudge against me for decades. Arthur almost laughed. You framed an innocent man. That accusation was dismissed years ago, only because evidence disappeared. The room became deathly quiet. Grant looked increasingly alarmed now. Somebody better explain exactly what's happening. Sophie stepped forward nervously with her laptop. I can. Vanessa's face lost color instantly. Sophie opened the recovered emails and projected them onto the private dining room screen. The moment the first message appeared, Grant Holloway swore under his breath. What the hell is this? Ethan stood frozen beside me while Vanessa stared at the screen silently. The email glowed across the wall for everyone to see Rivera still unaware of liability exposure. Grant turned sharply toward Vanessa. You told me Ethan controlled all financial routing. He does, Vanessa answered quickly. Then why are offshore entities connected to your father? No answer. Arthur stepped in immediately. Because this was never a legitimate investment structure. Leonard's calm demeanor finally began cracking. You have no idea what you're talking about. Arthur opened another folder. Oh, I think I do. One by one, he laid out the evidence. Michael Rivera's original financial records, the matching transfer structures, the emergency authority clauses, the audio recording. Leonard's own voice filled the room. Once the funds move, Rivera Urban Capital collapses under liability. Grant Holloway's face hardened instantly. You set me up too! Leonard stepped forward angrily. That recording was obtained illegally, maybe Arthur replied calmly. But combined with the financial evidence, it paints a very clear picture. Vanessa finally spoke again. Dad. The single word shifted everything. Not Leonard. Dad. Grant looked horrified. You brought your father into this company without disclosure? Ethan's face twisted painfully hearing that. You lied to me from the beginning. Vanessa looked directly at him now, and for the first time since I met her, her composure completely shattered. Tears filled her eyes instantly. I was trying to protect you. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. Protect me? You don't understand what he's capable of. Leonard's expression darkened immediately. "Vanessa." The warning in his voice was terrifying. She flinched. Actually flinched. And suddenly every piece finally clicked into place for me. Vanessa wasn't innocent, but she wasn't fully free either. Leonard had controlled her the same way he controlled everyone else. Through fear, through manipulation, through loyalty twisted into obedience. Vanessa looked at Ethan desperately. "I never meant for this to go this far. You told him I was easier to break than my father," Ethan whispered. Tears rolled down her face now. "I know. How many times did you lie to me?" She couldn't answer, because the truth was too big now. Then Leonard suddenly grabbed the folder of evidence from the table. "This conversation is over." But before he could move farther, the private dining room doors opened again. 2 federal agents stepped inside. Everything froze. One of them spoke calmly. Leonard Cole. For the first time all evening, I saw genuine fear appear in Leonard's eyes. "We'd like to ask you some questions regarding financial fraud and interstate wire transfers." Grant Holloway immediately stepped away from Leonard. Vanessa looked like she might collapse. Ethan stood motionless beside me, and suddenly, after 20 years, the truth was finally standing in the open. Leonard tried recovering his composure quickly. "This is absurd." One federal agent held up several documents. "We have enough probable cause to begin formal investigation proceedings." Arthur quietly looked at me. Michael had finally been vindicated, even if only the first step. Leonard's eyes moved toward Vanessa. For one brief moment, I expected him to protect her. Instead, he said coldly, "You handled the Rivera operation." The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. "Dad, you made emotional decisions." I watched Vanessa's face crumble completely then, not because of the investigation, because in that moment she finally realized Leonard would sacrifice her exactly the way he sacrificed Michael, exactly the way he planned to sacrifice Ethan. She had never been his daughter first, only another tool. Vanessa began crying openly now. "I did everything you asked." Leonard didn't even look at her. And suddenly, despite everything she'd done to my family, I felt sorry for her, because some people spend their whole lives trying to earn love from monsters who only know how to use people. Then Ethan spoke quietly beside me. "We're done." Vanessa looked at him with absolute devastation, but he turned away. And for the first time since this nightmare began, my son finally walked away from the people trying to destroy him. The weeks after Leonard Cole's arrest felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. Like the world had finally stopped spinning long enough for all of us to breathe again. Federal investigators moved quickly once Grant Holloway turned over additional financial records. The evidence Arthur helped uncover connected Leonard to years of hidden transfers, shell companies, and fraudulent development projects across several states. And this time, he couldn't bury it. Too many digital records existed now. Too many emails, too many witnesses, too many people willing to talk once they realized Leonard no longer had power over them. Vanessa became one of those people. That surprised me more than anything. 3 days after the confrontation at the Langford Hotel, Arthur called to tell me Vanessa had agreed to cooperate fully with investigators. She's giving them everything he explained. Account structures, hidden corporations, internal communications. I sat quietly at my kitchen table while listening. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction. After all, Vanessa had manipulated my son, lied to our family, and nearly destroyed everything Michael spent his life trying to protect. But another part of me kept remembering the fear in her eyes whenever Leonard spoke to her. And the terrible truth was this: people raised by monsters often become trapped inside survival long before they learn morality. That didn't excuse what Vanessa did, but it explained some of it. Ethan struggled with that reality far more than I did. For several weeks after the investigation began, he barely spoke to anyone except lawyers and accountants. Rivera Urban Capital survived the collapse, but only barely. Several investors withdrew immediately once the investigation became public. News articles spread fast online. Chicago development firm linked to financial fraud investigation. Rivera Urban Capital under review. Even though Ethan was eventually cleared of wrongdoing, public suspicion still damaged the company badly. I worried constantly about him during those weeks. Not because of money, because of shame. Shame can destroy a person far faster than bankruptcy ever will. One evening in late October, Ethan showed up at my house unexpectedly. When I opened the front door and saw him standing there alone, my heart nearly broke. He looked exhausted, thinner, older somehow. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then quietly he said, "I didn't know where else to go." I pulled him into my arms immediately, and just like that, my son started crying. Not polite tears, not controlled tears, the kind that come from deep inside a person after holding pain too long. I held him the same way I used to when he was little and afraid of thunderstorms. Some things never change. That night we sat together at my kitchen table, drinking coffee while rain tapped softly against the windows. For a long time, Ethan simply stared at Michael's old files spread across the table. Finally, he whispered, "Dad really tried to save me." "Yes." His eyes filled again. "And I spent years thinking maybe he was guilty." I reached across the table and took his hand gently. "That wasn't your fault." "Yes, it was." His voice cracked. "I should have defended him. You were a child." But I believed what people said. I understood that pain better than he realized. Because after Michael died, part of me blamed myself too, for not asking more questions, for not opening the envelope sooner, for not fighting harder back then. Grief always leaves people carrying invisible guilt. Ethan looked around the kitchen quietly. "This house still feels like him." I smiled softly. "He never really left us." For the first time in weeks, Ethan gave a small, genuine smile. Then his expression turned serious again. "There's something else." "What?" He looked down briefly before answering. "Vanessa asked to see me." A knot tightened immediately in my stomach. "What did you say I haven't answered yet?" I stayed quiet for several seconds. Finally, "What do you want to do?" Ethan leaned back heavily in his chair. "I don't even know anymore." His voice sounded tired in a way I had never heard before. "She lied to me from the beginning." "Yes, but sometimes—" He hesitated painfully. "Sometimes I think she actually cared about me." I thought carefully before answering. "I think she probably did." He looked surprised. "You do?" "Yes." After everything, I sighed softly. Love and manipulation can exist in the same person, Ethan, especially when someone grows up learning that loyalty matters more than honesty. He stared down at his coffee silently. "I keep replaying everything in my head," he admitted, "trying to figure out what was real." "That's normal." "She told me once she envied families like ours." I felt a strange ache in my chest hearing that. Because despite everything, I suddenly understood Vanessa better than I wanted to. Some people spend their entire lives starving for the kind of love other families take for granted. Then Ethan surprised me completely. She said Leonard never loved anyone unless they were useful. The room fell silent. I thought about Michael, about how deeply he loved us even while dying, about the envelope he left behind to protect Ethan years after he was gone. And suddenly the contrast between those two men felt enormous. One destroyed everyone around him. The other sacrificed himself trying to save his family. Ethan spoke again quietly. I almost became Dad. I frowned softly. What do you mean? I almost let ambition turn me into someone who ignored every warning sign. I shook my head immediately. No, but I did ignore them. You made mistakes, I said gently. That doesn't make you your father's failure. It makes you human. Tears filled his eyes again. Then slowly Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a folded bank document. What's this? I asked. I found it hidden in Dad's old storage box. I unfolded it carefully, and my breath caught instantly. It was an old investment account under Michael's name. The balance wasn't enormous, but it was enough to matter, enough to help. Attached was a handwritten note from Michael for Cheryl, in case the truth ever becomes too heavy. I pressed my hand against my mouth immediately. Even after everything, even after losing his reputation and career, Michael had still found a way to protect me, protect us. Ethan looked down overwhelmed. He knew someday this might all come back. Yes, I whispered tearfully. I think he did. A few weeks later, Sophie officially joined Rivera Urban Capital as part of the company's rebuilding process. Ethan restructured everything completely new. Compliance teams, transparent accounting, independent oversight. No hidden structures, no shortcuts, no secrets. And slowly the company survived. Not because of greed anymore, because Ethan finally understood what truly mattered. Family, integrity, truth. On Thanksgiving, the three of us sat together around my dining room table beneath the same old chandelier Michael installed decades earlier. The house smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon. Sophie laughed while arguing with Ethan over mashed potatoes. And for the first time in a very long while, the darkness finally felt farther away. Before dinner, Ethan paused beside his father's framed photograph near the fireplace. I'm sorry, Dad, he whispered quietly. Then he looked at me, and in his eyes I finally saw peace returning. Not the peace of forgetting, the peace of finally knowing the truth. After everything my family went through, I learned something important. Sometimes the people who love us most try to protect us in ways we don't understand until years later. Michael lost his reputation, his career, and eventually his health because he refused to become like Leonard Cole. But even after death, he still found a way to protect his family from the same trap. Ambition can blind us, pride can isolate us, and manipulation often comes dressed in kindness, confidence, and charm. But truth has a strange way of surviving even when powerful people try to bury it. If there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this. Never ignore the quiet warnings from people who genuinely love you. Sometimes a mother's fear isn't control. Sometimes it's protection. And sometimes the people who seem strongest are secretly carrying wounds nobody else can see. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Would you have believed Cheryl sooner? Or would you have trusted Vanessa too? Have you ever tried to warn someone you loved only to have them push you away? Please share your story in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe. Wherever you're watching from tonight, thank you for spending this time with me.